Okay, hi. It is. Actually, I need to put my phone on silent because I know what will happen. It's Tuesday, the 18th of April 2023. I'm putting my phone on silent because I know what's going to happen. And now that I've started recording, I wonder how long it'll be before Martin comes in. Not too long, no, Mark. Which I think I can hear him if he does as well. But anyway. Okay, I've been meaning to do this recording for quite a few weeks. Well, actually quite a few months. But now that I've figured out a bit better with the OBS piece of software kit, still trying to get to grips with it. I had to kind of familiarise myself because it was a month or so since I did the last video. But this video is specifically about my condition, which is FND. Functional Neurological Disorder. I asked a few weeks ago if people would like to hear about what it's like living with FND, which in some ways really presents like multiple sclerosis and at times Parkinson's. I'm going to have to pause this. Okay, right, so basically FND. I've now lived with FND for 8 years. It was January 2015 when the symptoms started getting really, really bad, and it was having a massive knock-on effect in my life. And then it was, I think it was March 2015 when I was on a night shift, and my client, she used to be an old matron of a nursing ward at the hospital. And she was in the latter stages of dementia. But on this particular night, she saw me really struggling to just basically walk and to move at all. And she just had a moment of being compos mentis, and she said to me, "Ruth, I think you need more help than I do." Well, she didn't say Ruth actually. She said, "I think you need more help than I do." And it was just like a moment of realisation, because I've been fighting it for so many weeks, and I really didn't want to give up nursing and care work. I absolutely loved doing my job, and so that was kind of when I realised I can't carry on working, and so I gave up work in the March, maybe at the beginning of April. That was definitely my last shift there, and then it was the next month, May, that I bought a wheelchair. Did my first lot of travelling with Aiden in a wheelchair, and poor Aiden had to push me around in it. But anyway, the purpose of this video is to kind of explain about FND, because I know that there are so many misconceptions, and I know that right back in the beginning, like even in 8 years, so much has changed. There's a lot more understanding than what there was even 8 years ago. I know that there were so many people who just thought it was in my head. And anybody who knows me, who thought like that, you know who you are. People just thought it was in my head, that it was a psychological problem. And that was awful actually, because that in itself, when you know that people aren't really believing what's going on, it really messes with your head. It's a horrible thing to be under. So I want to kind of explain about FND and some of the misconceptions about it. And I'm just going to read now. I'm going to read now about what it says on the FND site. So I'm going to go to small webcam and show you one of the websites for it. So if I go over to here. Functional neurological disorder is a brain network disorder that can encompass a diverse range of neurological symptoms, including limb weakness, paralysis, seizures, walking difficulties, spasms, twitching, sensory issues, and more. Anyone of any age can receive a diagnosis. For many, the symptoms are severe and disabling and life-changing for all. I have to say that on the Facebook groups that I'm part of, actually I'm just going to jot that down because I'm going to come back to that. The most saddest stories I read is of children who have 3, 4, 5 years old who come down with FND and they're unable to talk again, or they're unable to hear again, or speak or walk. They're in a wheelchair. I have to say those are like the saddest. Those are the ones that really bring me to tears. Just hearing the children, really. So yeah, anyone of any age. So whilst the symptoms may appear similar to those seen in neurological conditions like multiple sclerosis, Parkinson's and epilepsy, they can be just as debilitating, but they have a different underlying cause, which totally I agree with. There's people with FND epilepsy, but they can't be treated like a normal epileptic person would be treated. And the same with Parkinson's or multiple sclerosis, which can be treated. It can't be cured, but it can be treated. But that's not the same with FND. Really, with FND, you're trying to manage the pain and some of the symptoms, but it's really difficult. So the next paragraph, the basic wiring of the nervous system is intact, but there is a problem with how the brain and nervous system is working and how the brain fails to send and receive signals correctly. This impacts on how the body responds to different tasks such as movement control and attention. It's really interesting how sometimes it's like your brain switches off. I remember when we were in Greece last year and we'd had a really good day, and then I got up to leave the table and to go to my mobility scooter, and my brain literally stopped and I just was completely stuck. And Martin had to come and take my hands and try and get me to the chair, but my brain was not doing anything I was telling it to do. On that occasion I just broke down and just sobbed and sobbed because my brain had just got stuck. It just was not sending the right messages to the legs that I needed it to do. And I remember back in the days, it's not quite so bad now, which I thank God for, but I remember back in the days where I'd be seeing a neurological physiotherapist, and she would tell me to try and move my feet a bit or try and lift my leg just a little bit, and the leg would do absolutely nothing. And I'd be there concentrating so hard, but the leg would just not move because the brain just couldn't get those messages down. So it's almost like, another way I kind of put it, FND is almost like the computer of your body. So when you have a computer, you have hardware. So if the DVD player stops working, you can replace the DVD player. The hardware can be fixed. But when it's a software issue, that's a lot more complex to figure out and to sort out. And that's what FND is. It's like the software of your body, the software of your brain rather, that's just not functioning and working properly. So I'm going to go through some of the symptoms that I myself have really suffered and gone through. I'm going to go back to full webcam while I'm here. And some of this is very, very personal, but you know what? I'm actually quite open about some of the things that have happened to me, because if it helps other people who are really battling, then I don't care. I'm just going to say it as it is. So some of the major ways for me is my breathing. I've been diagnosed with dysfunctional breathing syndrome, but I'm absolutely sure it's all part of the FND because I don't remember it quite as bad before FND. So sometimes I will be laughing or messing around or doing housework, like emptying the dishwasher or trying to load the dishwasher, and I'll just stop breathing. I can be in the middle of a really awesome conversation, it's not even stressful, I'm having a laugh, and I'll just stop breathing, and I barely can talk, I can barely breathe properly, I become very weak. It's horrible, it's really horrible. And at times it comes with really bad like coughing fits where I'm just physically exhausted. I have to say, many years I had that, and it wasn't until March last year, 2022, where I had a week of really not being able to breathe. and not my BP, something was really bad. My heart rate was just going up and up because I was trying to do the blue asthma thing, but it wasn't helping because it's not an asthmatic thing. So yeah, I ended up in hospital that week. I ended up in hospital for 5 nights, 6 days, and they prescribed me after like 7 years of this horrible part of FND. They gave me codeine linctus. So even a couple of weeks ago, it just came out of the blue. I just couldn't breathe. I know what it was. I had people coming for dinner, and literally 5 minutes before they came for dinner, I couldn't stop. I couldn't breathe, and I was really struggling. So basically, on that occasion, I was just standing up, reaching up to get stuff in the cupboard, and my breathing went, and I just couldn't move. I was stuck, couldn't even turn around, and I heard some people come through the door. I think it was Ruth and Beth, and I couldn't talk, I couldn't turn around. It was awful, and I think I waited about maybe 15-20 minutes and still couldn't get it under control. So I had the codeine linctus, and thankfully within 4 or 5 minutes it does something that just completely calms my breathing right down. I was able to get control again and go back to being with my visitors and dishing up dinner and having a good laugh and stuff on that occasion. So yeah, breathing is a biggie. Brain freezes, I've already spoken about how my brain just completely freezes, and that's very frustrating. Really weird skin colours. I was going to try and get some photographs of this for you guys, but I've just about figured out how to do this part, and I didn't want to lose all the settings I got, so I haven't got the pictures up for you. But basically there have been times when my skin, so here I will suddenly have really, really deep red lines here, and it would be like really white there, and then it would be like really burgundy, and it would just come out of the blue. And we just call it FND lines now because it's so random. And also on my legs, on my stomach, all of a sudden my skin will completely change colour, and it will become like really blotchy deep red or burgundy with white blotches. It's really bizarre. It does have a very long complex name, and I have to say that hasn't happened for ages. It doesn't hurt, but it is really bizarre. I know I've been with my carers and I've looked down and I'm like, whoa, what is going on with my skin? And they're like, what the heck is that? Why does your skin just change so quickly to look like that? Coughing fits, yeah, that's part of my breathing really. Sometimes it's not my breathing that goes, it's my coughing fit starts. And the coughing fits are so intense and I lose my breathing. Muscle spasms, so I would say for the first 6 years of FND the muscle spasms were horrific. Absolutely horrific, and I would be absolutely just convulsing. I remember, 2020, yeah, when CD was here, and I was trying to drive up to Jojo's, and the spasms were horrific. I had to keep pulling over into the car parks off the motorway because the spasms were so bad. And my hands, sometimes I'd wake in the night and my hands are like absolutely can't move, and the pain level is horrific. Really horrid, to be honest. I have to say that my legs are a wee bit better. They still happen, but not as bad, not as intense. I'm really loath to taking diazepam and Tramadol because when I do, I'm just crying and off my face, and I hate that feeling. The funny thing is though, with these muscles, well, I say funny, is this van. I've got this amazing van, and it's been adapted specifically so that when my legs are really bad, I use all my hand controls. So I pull one arm and that's an accelerator, and I push it with the same arm and that becomes a brake. So when my legs aren't working, I go to hand controls. And recently it's not been so bad, so I've been using my legs, but I never know when it's going to happen, so I'm really grateful for that adaptation in my van. Arm spasms, sometimes this is a bit awkward. Sometimes I'll have a drink and all of a sudden my arm will twitch and I'll spill drink everywhere or drop things. Oh yeah, that's another thing, dropping things. Drop things so many times, and I'm like, and some days are better than others. Do you see how some of these similarities with MS? Because, yeah, some of it's very much like MS. So I just have days where I'll just be dropping loads of things. I'll be like, oh, for goodness sake, Ruth. I get frustrated with myself for that. My arms, my shoulders, they are horrendous. And the thing is, swimming, I absolutely adore swimming. It's literally my only thing I can do exercise-wise. And before I had FND, I was in the gym 3 times a week, doing Pilates, doing swimming, going in the gym, doing cardio. And I can't even do cardio now on the gym. Can't even go on a bike, which really frustrates me. But I can swim. I can't swim front crawl. My brain won't tell my arms how to do front crawl. And that was my best stroke. And my best form was on front crawl. But I can't do that. So I'm just doing backstroke and breaststroke. And then honestly my arms really hurt afterwards, but I'm so grateful to be able to go swimming. So I tend to try to do 20-30 lengths, which is half a mile, and then I do loads of treading water in the deep end and other aqua exercises really. And I want to try and get back up to 3 times a week if I can. I would really like to do that. My arms really painful. My carers, basically at the end of the day, very often Martin has to undress me, put my nightie on. Sometimes I just, can't undress myself. Undress myself is very painful. I tend to go swimming last thing at night, so I don't have to worry about all the undergarments, I should say. Another thing that I don't think is as bad is my leg and my foot was really going inwards. It wasn't like when I stood up, my legs and my form just wasn't normal. My legs and my feet were like going right inward. I think that's a bit better now. I'll have to ask Martin that. I think that's a little bit better. Memory. Sometimes my memory is... I used to have a really good memory for details. And that's not as great as it was. I've noticed that. So I'm always praying that God just keeps my memory going as best as He can. What else? What other things are there? Oh yeah, the other thing is severe incontinence. Really severe incontinence. So with FND, sometimes people get fecal incontinence and other people get urinary incontinence. Mine was urinary, and so honestly it was 3 years before I had the courage to tell Martin. 3 years I kept that to myself. Don't know how I did it now, quite frankly. I really don't know how I did it, but I remember talking to Naomi and Joe and them saying, you've got to tell Martin this, you can't keep that from him, you've got to tell him. And it was horrible. I hated it. Having to tell my beloved that I was, so severely incontinent, and it again, that happens out of the blue. I can be great for a day or great for 3 days, and then all of a sudden I go through 5 pairs of clothing, and there's no rhyme or reason to that either. I know I've had I remember once I had a really great night with loads of visitors and had really good fun, and then I got up to go to bed and that was it. I was in such a mess. Martin had to come and attend to me because I couldn't do it, and I just was like, oh my goodness, they must have thought I was on great form and doing really well, and then 5 minutes later I was in a poor way on the commode having Martin to get me undressed and changed and redressed and pyjamas on, and having a tic-tac just in case I got bad breath. Not that you can hear it or smell it, rather. So, is there any other symptoms that I personally have? I don't think so. I think that I've gone through my own personal symptoms. By the way, if you have any questions to ask me, I really don't mind. I'm very open. But I'm going to go back to the FND Hope website, I think, and show you some of the other symptoms that other people are going through, really. Bless their hearts. So if I go back to small webcam, go back to this, and I think I'll go back to this one. So on here, if I go to symptoms, as you can see, there is a great big, hang on a minute, there's a great big list of symptoms that people really suffer with. Headaches and migraines, involuntary movements, yeah, I have that. Cognitive changes, chronic pain, pain, my goodness. Sensory changes, sleep disturbances, yeah, I have hallucinations, I forgot to talk about that. Sometimes at night I hallucinate horrifically. Terrible for Martin, terrible. And then what else goes on? Visual changes as well. Although that's not really me. Diagnosis, yeah, that's a good point. So diagnosis tends to take a jolly long time. What I find absolutely, let me go back to this, what I find absolutely shocking is that it's the second most common illness that neurologists diagnosed with today. After migraines and headaches, FND is the second most common illness, disorder that they diagnose. And yet, most nurses, doctors, GPs, physios, they don't know about it. I find that quite shocking. Also, diagnosis for me took over 3 years, and I've spoken to so many patients now, FND people, who had exactly the same. 3 years, at least 3 years before they get diagnosed. And the horrible thing about diagnosis is that you're having all these tests and you know something's wrong, but every single test comes back negative. So when people are kind of following your story and they're like, okay, what happened with that test? And you're like, oh, it's negative. And then in their mind, they're thinking, see, it must be in your head. It must be in your head because every test you've had done is negative. And I'm trying to think back to what the tests were I had done now. I had brain MRI. And on the subject of brain MRIs, there was a university in America that found differences. About 3 years ago, they found differences with FND patients in the brain matter. And then in the last year, they found more evidence to show that there's a software issue in the brain, basically. I'd be grateful for that coming out. But yeah, I had an MRI. I had something that is done to MS patients, I think. You know, they stick these really long needles into your legs. It's not acupuncture. And then they put the electric current down that needle. Oh, it's awful. I remember having Sarah Jane with me that day because I was just, horrible day. And they put these electrical currents down and to see how your body jerks and reacts, and obviously that came back negative as well. I can't even remember all the tests. I obviously had loads of blood tests done, and I had psychological tests done as well. Had a lumbar puncture done. Nothing there as well. Because I think they were looking for MS with that as well, but didn't find it. So in the end, after 3.5 years maybe, the neurologist said it's FND. And I really battled with that diagnosis. It honestly, I just could not get my head around it. And even then, there were people who knew a bit about FND that were still saying it's psychological. And I just really battled with it. And I remember there was one guy at the hospital rather, not the college, who was a specialist neurological physiotherapist, and he knew about FND, and he really took the time to explain to me and gave me ideas of things I could do to kind of strengthen limbs and all that sort of stuff. And he was so patient with me. He was really kind, he was really gracious, really patient. But I still couldn't get my head around it, and neither could Martin. And the thing that was a really big breakthrough for us was joining support groups of FND on Facebook. There are loads. There are the international ones, so we're part of a couple of international ones, and then there's the UK ones. And I didn't feel so alone, because those 3 years I actually felt incredibly alone, not having anybody who knew and understood about it. But to be part of a group where actually they were going through horrendous things, and all their tests were coming back negative, and their family and friends were saying, "Oh, it's in your head." I didn't feel so alone, and that was a really great feeling. And I think it really helped Martin too. I think when we first got on those sites, we both were kind of looking a lot and looking at people's stories, and it was really, really helpful to both of us. We're not on them so much now. Sometimes, as I said, if a child comes up on that site and has come down with it, it's awful. We should pause this again. Okay, so talking about Facebook and the support groups. So if you know anybody that is battling with this, then I would really encourage you to tell them about Facebook support groups. Support groups for anything really. If you're battling something that you feel really alone with, with an illness, a disorder, then they really do help you. Oh yeah, there's something else I was going to tell you about. So I remember about 3 years ago, I was at the bank, and one of the ladies that I've known for a little bit for years working in there, she said, "Out of interest, Ruthy, what's wrong with you if you don't mind me asking?" And I was like, "I don't mind anyone asking. It's FND." And I went to explain to her what FND is, and she was like, no, you don't need to tell me. She was like, my cousin's got it, and she's really suffered, and her children have it now as well. And so basically overnight, just everything went from her neck down, and I think her speech, and her children are terribly suffering. And I've heard that a few times now, of parents and children having FND. And because of that, they're now looking into the genes to see if there's something in the genes that cause the FND. I don't know the answers to that part yet, and I haven't looked that one up recently, to be honest. Don't know. There is a specialist in our country called Dr. Edwards, and probably on his site, you might have something on there, but I just haven't looked into that for ages. So, what was the other thing I was going to share with you? One of the things that's helped me, there's a few things that have helped me actually. I remember in the early days I had to rest. Well, I still have to rest. But if I got really tired, then I would cope even way less. And we're all the same, aren't we? If we're overtired, we don't cope with things the same. And I remember the time years ago we went out to a barbecue at Julie's, and I was exhausted, and I was really struggling. It was the first year, I think. I'm pretty sure it was the first year that I had FND. And I had tried to get from the car to the garage with my walker, and it was awful. And I was a mess. And I remember coming home that night and flipping out. I think it's the only time I did flip out because of FND. But I remember Martin was in bed, and I was so upset, I was so frustrated, so terribly frustrated, because the things I wanted to do, I couldn't do, the most simplest of things. And I absolutely flipped out. I don't know if I threw anything at him. And it wasn't against him, but I just had enough. And I was just like crying and angry and shouting. And I kind of was like, whoa, I don't want to go down that road again. Because many years ago I had a problem with anger. And I definitely do want to go down that road again. So I kind of said to myself, before I kind of put myself in those situations again where it's going to be really hard, I'm going to have to rest. I'm going to have to like watch how much I do, and I'm going to have to rest and be strict with myself. And there are times when I might do more in one day, but then I have to rest the next day. And sometimes I can go like 3 days and be really great, and then I have a day where I absolutely crash. But resting's a biggie. When everything is a lot harder than an able-bodied person, so you have to rest. The other thing that's been a massive help to me is looking forward. Sometimes I think people give up and they're just like, I can't do it anymore, I'm just going to give up. And I think that's the worst thing to do. I can honestly say that I have a greater passion for life now. Passion for living life to the full, going on adventures, going on holidays, doing extreme stuff. God willing, I really hope so. I really hope I can do this. But I really want to do wheelchair paragliding, if I can, later on in the year. And I know that since I got sick, I made a bucket list. I've never had a bucket list before. In fact, I didn't really have, until God really changed my life around, I didn't really have any dreams or aspirations. I was a bit boring back in the day. But now I've got a bucket list, and I'm still adding things to it. I added something to it the other day. Going to the Albert Hall, I think, was one of them. Going to the Albert Hall, and then there's something else I want to do that's got to go on my bucket list. Where is it? See if I can find it to remind myself. Oh, darn it. Oh yeah, go to the going to the Albert Hall, really want to do that, especially for the proms, and gate crash a party. Never gate crashed a party before, so want to do that. Any of you out there want to gate crash a party with me? Please let me know. I remember me and Ida and Uncle Eugene, we were in Jerusalem, and King David Hotel, the really famous hotel. There was a really posh room with a famous table where they'd signed very famous documents back in the 1940s, and it became a nation. And there was a big tray of all these posh drinks, and I just walked up and helped myself to drink, and they never said anything, even though I clearly wasn't part of the hotel or any group. They didn't say anything. But that's about as close as I've got to gate crashing the party. Really want to do that though. So yeah, I've got a bucket list and holidays, looking forward, always trying to look forward. Ultimately, I'm looking forward to eternity. But I have a real passion for life now. I really do love life, and I do get frustrated when there are able-bodied people who just sit watching the flipping TV every day. Like what? Oh, that's so unfulfilling. I couldn't think of anything more boring, quite frankly. But hey ho, we're all different, aren't we? So yeah, and obviously my faith keeps me going. My faith keeps me looking forward, ultimately to eternity, and yeah, for all the things that God still has for me to do. Because just because I'm disabled in a wheelchair doesn't mean He doesn't have stuff for me to do. There's still things that He's calling me to do right now, which is quite exciting. Some of those things I can't talk about right here, but are very exciting. What was the other things I was going to talk about? There's a few things that I've learned in greater, not greater detail, I don't know what the word is. I'd say that I have a greater appreciation for things that we take for granted in our lives and in our bodies. So specifically my body now. So I know that there's been times when my breathing's been so horrific, but even if I've had half an hour where my breathing's been calmer, I've been able to say thank you God for the last half hour, thank you, that I've been able to breathe calmer and better, and it's not such a struggle. And then I remember once I was in the swimming pool, and my arms had really started messing up, and my arms were not doing what I was telling them to do. And my arms were really hurting me, really paining me, and the spasms were really bad. My legs had got a wee bit better because they were starting to just move a little bit, but my arms were shocking. And when I was in the swimming pool, I remember being down to one arm working, two legs a little bit working, but then my other arm wasn't working. And he really spoke to me about the fact that I had... So I was in the swimming pool and very frustrated, in a lot of pain, and I know somebody came into my mind, but God really put somebody into my mind, and he really put on my heart to be grateful for the 3 limbs that were working. Even though they weren't working great, they were still working, and that there are other people that literally don't have any limbs that are still living life and doing the best that they can. And there's a friend of mine who's in a wheelchair, another friend of mine who's in a wheelchair with another illness, and I really believe that God put her in my life to always remind me that there's always somebody much worse than me. Which, yeah, that's been a biggie for me. And yeah, definitely in the swimming pool, I shall never forget that occasion when I thought be grateful for the 3 limbs that are working, and not just focus on the one that isn't working. And that's the other thing to say, basically. When you're ill, when you're disabled, you have to focus on all the things that you can do, and don't focus on the stuff that you can't do. Because if you do that, you're just going to get really peed off and frustrated and angry and bitter and all the rest of it. But when you focus on the things you can do, there are still lots of things that you can do. So that's another really biggie, I think. What else was I going to share about? Oh yeah, I was going to share about the time I was in Romania. I might do another video on this, actually. But I believe that God brings great things out of really horrid things and really difficult things. And actually, I'm not going to talk about Romania, I'm going to talk about Moldova. I was on a mission in Moldova, and it was 4 or 5 years ago. And Moldova is former communist, and there's a very, very different feel in that country. I'm used to Africa, I'm used to Islamic countries where hospitality is amazing. People are warm, welcoming. It is so different in Moldova. Naturally, the people just, there's a communist thing. It's really difficult, really hard. And when I first got to, what's the capital of Moldova called? I've forgotten now. But when I got to the capital, I just basically had 3 days before camp started, so I could just recuperate after the journey. And boy, did I need to recuperate after that journey. And I remember after 2 or 3 days of really sleeping and resting loads, I wanted to get out of the hotel and just explore a little bit outside my hotel. And I was just horrified with how I was treated. People would kind of look at me, but look through me. And if I was going towards the door, they would either slam the door in my face and would just deliberately not open the door for me. It really showed me how different and how kind and helpful people are in UK. It really struck me. People are always trying to help and willing to help in this country. I honestly believe that. In Moldova, it was very different. And anyway, we were running like a kids camp for teenage girls who were at high risk of being trafficked. Because a lot of these girls are coming from remote areas, remote villages, where tradition is a lot more. The attitude towards disabled people under communism was you're worthless. What can you do for society? You can't do anything for society. You can't work, you can't earn money. You're worthless. And I really saw that. I really saw people looking at me like that. And it didn't bother me, because I know who I am and I know the giftings that I've still got and the things that I can still do. And so it didn't bother me, but it was really apparent that that's how people were. And when I first saw the girls, and I was whizzing around on my mobility scooter, and the girls were coming off the buses, I just saw their faces. They were horrified, shocked. They didn't know where to put their faces, because I was like, hi, being all jolly and friendly, and they were like, whoa, this is weird. But within 3 days, out of a 5-day camp, I saw barriers coming down, and I saw just them responding to me really differently. So within like 3 days, the barriers were down. They were happy to talk with me and chat with me and open up to me. And by the Friday, they were just having hugs and crying on my lap, just saying, we don't want to go, we don't want to leave you. And just those barriers have completely gone. And when I came home, it was an amazing camp that was. When I came home and I was kind of processing it and praying about it, and I was thinking, do you know what? If that whole generation of girls, it was like 150 girls, their attitudes, their hearts, their perspective, their everything was different towards a disabled person, I kind of got to a point where I thought, do you know what? That's really awesome if you can change a generation for the good. A generation of people that, you know, the older generation still think that the disabled are worthless. What is the point of them? Just hide them away, let them die in rooms of starvation. You know, that stuff was going on. But I don't know if it's still going on today, but I know that had been going on. So to change a generation, I don't know if this is really going to make sense, but actually I kind of got to the point where I thought, actually, just God used the good things in my disability to change attitudes and to change a generation, and I was really happy with that. And that doesn't mean to say that I want to be in a wheelchair. It doesn't mean to say that I want to be ill and disabled and that I'm just going to carry on putting up with it. It's not that, but I recognise that there are really, really powerful things that can come out of disability. And I know that with some of the disabled people I've met, and people with severe learning difficulties, and people with severe physical disabilities, that there's something very, very precious in them that we might just naturally miss when we don't spend time with them. And so I believe that just God will use anything in my disability. He can use any of it for him, for his glory, for his children. I'm totally happy with that. And there are more. I'll share one more story with you, and then I'll share one more story with you, which just blew my mind. When I was in Gambia, and I was deep in the bush with the villagers, with the tribes, there was a lady that I absolutely adored, but she was hounded by the children. She was whipped. She was struck by pieces of wood. All she had round her was a piece of cloth, ripped, torn, filthy cloth around her waist. The rest of her was uncovered. She had skin with just deep grooves where all the sand and muck had gone into her skin. She was in a really poor way. She was really tormented. Tormented by the village folk as well as voices in her head. Horrible spiritual stuff that goes on over there. And every time I went to her, I just wanted to be with her and sit with her quietly. And there was a time when I really felt good, so I wanted to wash her feet. And I'm not saying this to show off, but not at all. But I said to the group, we need to wash her. We need to wash her and just show her love. And we only had the only cream we had on us was moisturising sun cream. So we got a bowl of water and t-shirts, and we washed her and cleansed and dried her and put this cream on her. And And then there was another time when we were in another village when the whole village had come out to see us, including the Arcalos, the village imams, the deputy imam, the women folk, the men folk. And he said, I want you to wash their feet. You remember Jesus did that with his disciples, he washed their feet. And I remember saying to the team then, we need to wash their feet. And it was really interesting actually, because when I got back to England, 2 weeks later, I was sharing with a friend how this had just come out of the blue in this village. And it turned out that exactly the same day, at the same time, he had said to her exactly the same. I need to wash somebody's feet as a show, as a sign of just love and kindness and serving, all of those things. He said exactly the same to her on the same day while I was in Africa. So anyway, that's kind of a little tiny bit of what we did in Gambia sometimes under God's direction. And after I got FND and I was still trying to go swimming, I didn't have my carer with me and I was trying to push through the pain. I got out of the swimming pool and the pain was horrific and I didn't have any more pain relief. And I couldn't dress myself, I couldn't put my knickers on, my trousers on, I couldn't do anything, it was awful. I think I'd managed to put my bra on and my top half, but I couldn't do anything else. And I'd seen two little girls playing with their mother in the swimming pool, and then I heard these two little girls running up and down outside the door, and I managed to get to the door and open the door a little bit because I was still kind of only half dressed, and said to these little girls, please would you go and get your mummy because I desperately need help. Can you get mummy and ask mummy to help? So these two little ones, they went and got their mum, and as soon as their mum saw me sitting on the toilet, because I was back on the toilet by that point, she knew, because I was crying, and she could see that I was in a bad way. And she just got down on her knees and she started just really gently and kindly putting my socks on me, putting my knickers on me, putting my trousers on me, putting my shoes on me. And her two girls were in the bathroom with me, the disabled bathroom, and I realised as she was talking to her two wee girls, I recognised that tongue, I recognised that language, like, I don't know what it means, but I recognised the tongue. So I said to her, what language are you speaking? No, I said, first of all, I said, what language are you speaking? I said, Mandinka. Really? Mandinka? And then I said to her, what country are you from? She was, Gambia. I was like, really, Gambia? And then I said to her, and whereabouts in Gambia are you from? And she was from Bakau. I was like, oh my goodness, my school is like, 2 to 5 kilometres just up the road from Bakau. I have kids that live in Bakau that come to my school. And here was a lady at my feet, dressing me and being so kind and caring to me. So all those years that I had been serving and loving on those people in Gambia, God had brought somebody who literally just lived down the road, can come from down the road from where my school is in Gambia, and he brought her to that place where I so desperately needed help. And I was just blown away by God's goodness and just how he moves and how he does things. And literally I've got story after story of seeing how he has done incredible things whilst I've been in a wheelchair, and he's going to be doing even more greater things even in 2 weeks time. It's with a mission that's going to be happening, and I'm excited about that. So anyway, I hope that's helped you understand F&D a bit better. As I said, if you have any questions, please feel free to ask me. I'm pretty open. Yeah. There is something that I haven't talked about that I'm normally quite open about, and that is sex and marriage. Actually, marriage and sex. and I don't think Martin will mind me sharing this bit, but you know, when you get married, when you get married, you promise to love somebody in sickness and in health, and for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health. And I know that I've shared this on when we've had our parties, like our anniversary do. And it's one thing to say a promise in sickness and in health, but living it with your husband or wife is a different thing. And Martin has lived with me and seen me at my worst as well. I'm screaming in pain and waking him up with horrific hallucinations, or changing me when I'm absolutely soaked through. And marriage has adapted. I can honestly say that our marriage is way stronger and way better, and I respect him so much more than I ever did, and I adore him so much more than I ever did. And one of the things that changes is sex as well, because like every other area of marriage, it changes and adapts, and you learn to change and adapt with it, which is not always easy. I'm not saying it's easy, and I'm not saying it's easy, but in marriage things adapt and change, and I didn't want to just pretend that issue isn't an issue, because it was an issue. Sex, part of marriage, is an issue. But so are the other parts of marriage, isn't it? Communication, finance, confrontation, or what's the other one? Can't think of the other one right now. But things have to adapt when you get sick, when you get ill, and sex in marriage and all the other things in marriage have had to adapt. And I thank God for Martin's patience and love over the last 8 years. So I think that's it. Flipping out, I've been talking for nearly 52 minutes. Wow. Bye for now. I may do another video sometime on all the other wonderful things that have happened over the last 8 years of F&D. All the amazing answers to prayer, miracles I've seen happen. So whilst I've been in a wheelchair, if you want to see that, let me know. But I think that's all for now, guys. Bye for now. Bye.